I'm Rio, and this is Rio's Experimental Archaeology. Today we're investigating a centuries-old solution for waterproofing ceramics, specifically examining the research of Reed and colleagues. By AD 200, the shift to settled agriculture demanded pottery that could actually hold liquid. But raw, unglazed clay is essentially a ceramic sponge. It's porous, it leaks, and without a seal, it's practically useless for long-term water storage. That's where Juniper resin comes in. Reed's team discovered a mysterious, resinous, bumpy surface on early lino polished wares. I believe this wasn't just a finish, but a Juniper-based sealant technology, one that carried forward even as vessel forms evolved into these corrugated styles in the 900s.
To see if we can replicate that exact archaeological fingerprint, we're testing a hot flash application. We're turning raw earth into a functional tool. But first, we have to go to the source. Our journey starts here with 1C juniper.
I've been procuring juniper berries for the past couple of months now. I'm currently walking around looking for a juniper tree with a good amount of dry juniper berries. Oh, wow, there's a lot of juniper berries underneath this one. No idea why there's so many juniper berries under some trees, but most of these trees out here have nothing.
I'm out here gathering berries from the 1C juniper, not just for the connection to the landscape, but for the specific chemistry they provide. While many people think of juniper resin as the sticky sap from the trunk, the berries offer something different, a high concentration of essential oils and natural waxes that act as a carrier for the resin. Unlike raw sap, which can be brittle and prone to cracking when it cools, the lipids in the berries provide a more flexible, durable finish. This hot flash seal isn't just about waterproofing, it's about creating a surface that can survive the expansion of a cooking fire. By selecting the berries over the sap, I'm utilizing a biological plasticizer, a natural way to ensure the seal remains resilient rather than glass-like. I'm conducting this experiment using a corrugated vessel, a form that wouldn't fully dominate the Southwestern kitchen until centuries after the early lino types. As the technology shifted towards these high-textured, heat-efficient walls in the AD 900s, the change wasn't just about thermodynamics. These rhythmic pinches were a visual language, a way to signal cultural identity during a time of immense social movement across the plateau. History isn't a series of hard stops, it's a continuation. The same hands that once polished lino gray were now adapting ancestral knowledge to a new era of ceramic design. While this isn't a true lino form, it is a testament to that enduring tradition, testing how an ancient sealant logic performs on a more complex, textured surface.
We're out here today firing some corrugated pottery that is going to be used in our Juniper oil earthenware sealing project. We have a jar with handles with a lid that is part of a set with this here ladle that will be used for basically ancient alchemy. We've got two mugs. One is going to be sealed with juniper oil and the other is not, to serve as a control. Then we have a bowl and a pitcher that are essentially just practice pieces. It's a little windy today, so wish me luck and let's see how it goes. 6 pots and 1 reduction firing. This is gonna be a new record for me. Yeah, sure, they're all corrugated. There's no organic paint I have to worry about, but it's good practice. Dang good practice.
Loading a pit kiln is a game of high-stakes Tetris. You're balancing airflow, heat distribution, and the weight of the fuel. I always struggle to get the geometry just right, and in this heat, the temptation is to rush. But a single error means an entire project is lost. You plan it through before it starts. You act with deliberation. You get it right. Everything is on the line. Cover sherds are the engine of the kiln. They have to act as a shield to keep the pots from being smothered by charcoal, but they still have to let the pots breathe. It's a tightrope walk. Seal them too tight and they won't oxidize. Leave them too opened and the pots will shatter from the shock. It's all about creating that perfect microclimate. I usually stack my fuel in a teepee, but for this firing, I'm trying a more conventional log crib style. I haven't made enough observations yet to say which one performs better, but the goal here is stability and even airflow. We're just watching to see how the geometry of the wood affects the life of the fire. Timing is everything. I wait for the wood to transition into structural charcoal, glowing red with just a ghosting of white ash. I start by sealing the perimeter, choking off the oxygen from the outside in, and working steadily towards the center. This isn't just burying the fire, it's capturing a moment of transformation.
Time for the most exciting part. Let's dig it up and see if all that work paid off. Let's open it up and see if they survived. Lid looks as though it survived. Yep. Oh wow, that one's a beauty. I love it. I love them all. Looks like a successful firing. Man, those have some neat colors on them, don't they? They came out looking like they've been used for 1,000 years. Very nice. It's exactly what I was going for. That appears to have been a successful firing. I don't see any cracks and everything looks like it came out alive and in one piece. So first we have this little jar with a lid and 2 handles on the side that I'm gonna use for processing my juniper berries in. This here ladle that I'm gonna use to scoop the resin out while it's hot and pour it into one of these mugs. I'm gonna brush it around and that should seal it with juniper berry resin. Of course, I have an extra mug to use as a control to see if the sealing actually keeps the water in. I would call that a very successful firing. Please hit like and subscribe. Now that we've collected all of those juniper berries in the lowlands, the next step is to crush them into a fine powder using this mortar and pestle I have. Let's see how it goes. Wow, I actually get a surprisingly fine powder from all of this. It's a little coarse, there are some seed holes in it, but for the most part, that wasn't much work to get a fairly fine powder. It's sticky, but it's not so sticky that it's not usable. It kind of feels like sappy sawdust. We've ground all of our juniper berries, and the next step is to put it in our lidded vessel and prepare it for processing over the fire. It smells so good. So the next step is we've got some distilled water, and we're gonna fill it maybe half an inch over the top. I've let the mash of crushed juniper berries and water soak for about 30 minutes to help the porosity of the earthenware be more fire resistant. And additionally, what I'm gonna do is I'm basically gonna do a double broiler method where I'm gonna have the pot that we're cooking inside of this bigger bowl, which is filled with cinders that will essentially help the volatile oils heat up slower, which is exactly what we want.
With the clay vessels between 150 to 180 C, I'm triggering a hot flash seal. These mugs are already fired, but I've brought them back to temperature to act as a thermal sponge. The heat instantly thins the juniper varnish, forcing it to search deep into the microscopic pores of the corrugated walls.
It took about 3 hours to cook the juniper berries down to a resin that I could apply to the heated pots. Now, it's a fool who speaks speculation out loud, but I gotta say the sealed mug has a nice shine to it, and it has a visual alteration that is exactly what I was hoping for. If you look on the inside, it's hard for you to see, but it does look like there's a coating that's clear and kind of like a brownish chocolatey caramel color. But most of the juniper berry fragments will wash off, so I'm gonna have to get home and I'm gonna have to do some water and I'm gonna have to compare the two.
Visually, both vessels held up perfectly, 8 hours inside with 0 leaks, but the measurements revealed the hidden physics. We tracked mug weight, water volume, and temperature to find the signal. The control vessel performed exactly as designed, absorbing a measured amount of moisture to stabilize its temperature. The treated mug, however, showed a much longer rate of absorption. The data is clear. The resin fundamentally changed the vessel's performance without sacrificing its structural integrity.
Now that's a good cup of coffee. The pilot results are in, and it's a massive green light. The smoking gun was a thermal data. Even after 8 hours inside, the control mug acted as a natural regulator, staying 30% cooler than the ambient air, but the treated mug stayed 12% closer to room temperature, proving the resin effectively armored the pores and broke the evaporative cycle. Is this ancient juniper berry seal 100%? Not yet. I noticed some windows in the deep corrugation that need to be better flood-filled next time, but it makes me curious. How would this sealant perform on a polished surface like a lino gray replication? I have some big speculations on how that geometry would change the chemistry, But as I have said before, only a fool speaks speculation out loud. If you want to see that test next, let me know in the comments. But for now, this prehistoric technology is officially back in service. Please like and subscribe.